communities around the country, which will make a difference.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, this country's military and diplomatic support for Ukraine is strong and has strong support across the country. Less well known is a programme that has gone on for a decade, led by the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, to support the Verkhovna Rada, or Ukrainian Parliament. So does my right honourable friend agree that should this country host a reconstruction conference with the Ukrainians to discuss how Ukraine can win the peace, that the Foreign Office and the Westminster Foundation and other bodies can come together to see how we can help President Zelensky in the next stage of his country's development?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point, and as we look forward to hosting the Reconstruction Conference for Ukraine later this year, I'll make sure to take up his suggestion and involve all those organisations that can provide support to us and ultimately make sure that we can rebuild Ukraine in the way that it deserves.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government will want to help maintain popular backing in the UK for our support to Ukraine, including by helping people with their energy bills. More than 40,000 people across Devon live in homes that are off the gas grid. They're on the rural equivalent of prepayment meters. They need the money up front in order to pay for their heating oil and for their alternative fuels. The government announced an alternative fuel payment last September, but people in Devon are still waiting. What will the Prime Minister say to people who are off the gas grid and are waiting for their alternative fuel payment 5 months later?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we specifically considered people who are off the gas grid when designing the energy support schemes that we put in place, which is why the bulk of the support was delivered to those who had electricity meters to ensure it reached people like he mentioned, including many of my own rural constituents as well. That money should be getting to them. I'll make sure that it moves as quickly as possible. But we also put in place the local household support fund to provide discretionary funding that local councils can give to those households who are most in need.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Speaker, there's no doubt that the NHS is under enormous pressure across the UK, and despite record numbers of nurses and doctors, workforce remains a challenge. So can I welcome that for the first time the NHS will get an independently verified workforce plan. But we have to think long term on buildings too, and so in that regard can the Prime Minister look closely at proposals to rebuild Leighton Hospital, which is a campaign that has the support of thousands of residents in the South Cheshire?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that Leighton Hospital has been allocated over £44 million to address some of the immediate issues at that site, but I also know that the honourable friend is keen to ensure continued investment in his local hospital, and I know that the Department for Health are looking at more hospitals to join the new hospital programme, and I'm sure that they will have heard what he said, indeed the voices of his constituents too.
Liz Twist.
Mr. Speaker, bus services are vital to our communities for work, for health, for school and for socialising. But in a matter of days, the buses that millions depend on will face another crisis with the ending of the bus recovery grant and predicted cuts of 15 to 20% in mileage would be devastating for people across my constituency and others. Will the Prime Minister commit to extending the bus recovery grant so that communities in my constituency and many others are not left isolated? And will he ask the Transport Secretary to meet with me to discuss this issue?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we recognise the vital importance of buses in our local communities, and that's why we're well on the way to fulfilling our commitment to invest £3 billion over this Parliament in our bus transformation, and that includes funding for local councils to subsidise unprofitable routes through the Bus Services Operators Grant, and recent money to help cap operator fares at £2 through the spring. And of course, we always continue to see how we can support bus services in the long term.
Anna Furr.
Speaker, would my right honourable friend agree that apprenticeships, such as those offered by the excellent South Essex College in Leigh-on-Sea, which I visited on Monday for National Apprenticeship Week, are a great pathway into work?
Mr. Speaker, I completely agree with my honourable friend and pay tribute to her local college, particularly in National Apprenticeship Week. And I know something that we discussed just in Cabinet yesterday, we also have the country's first Education Secretary who herself was an apprentice, and it's something we're proud of.
Ariel Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I join the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in their condolences to the victims of the devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria? Can I also reiterate my thanks to the Foreign Secretary for the speed of the initial UK response? Mr. Speaker, but as we enter the third day of the earthquake, the bitter cold, unforgiving weather means that the likelihood of pulling more survivors from the rubble becomes less and less likely. And the immediate humanitarian impact is devastating. So can I ask the Prime Minister when we can expect an announcement on what further aid his government will commit to relief efforts and what discussions he is having with his international counterparts to ensure our response meets the scale of this crisis?
Prime Minister.
Yeah, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her question and join her in paying tribute to the Foreign Secretary for the work that he's doing. So I spoke to President Erdogan yesterday to reiterate our commitment to provide Turkey with what support they need. Right now, that is search and rescue. She's right, we are in that vital window at the beginning of a situation like this, which is why our search and rescue teams are on the ground providing that assistance. The Foreign Secretary is also speaking to his counterpart at the United Nations to ensure that the humanitarian support that we can provide is well targeted. Also in Syria, where we fund the White Helmets, which are on the ground doing work. We're continuing to be in touch with everyone that we need to, and I can assure the Honourable Lady will continue to provide all the support that is asked of us.
I'm pleased to announce, as members will be aware, that President Zelensky will be addressing both houses in Westminster Hall imminently. That will require me to suspend the House's business in a moment. Members attending the address should go directly to the hall following the doorkeeper's directions. The House is expected to resume its sitting at approximately 2 o'clock. The division's bells will be sounded 5 minutes before the resumption. The House is now suspended. Order, order.